Okay, this one's going to be a little bit shorter than last time. I know my last video was a little bit long, but we're still talking about electrical energy. And this next thing we're going to go into right now is how we can make an electric circuit, but that has multiple devices. So last time I showed you a simple circuit where we were lighting up one light bulb. Um, we saw how electricity has to flow from the battery through the wires, through the device, and then back to the battery again. But not everything has just one device. For example, if you look at these two pictures on the screen here, we've got Christmas lights and then we have some old patio lights outside. And those are all on the same string, but they have multiple bulbs on there. So you can make electric circuits that have multiple devices or multiple light bulbs on them. We're going to look at ways that you can do that. Okay. So first of all, let's review real quick um, what an electric current is and what it has to have in order to flow. So the current, if we remember, like the current of water, the current is just the flow of electricity as it travels through that path. And that path we call the circuit, all right? So remember that it flows out of one end of the battery, through the wires, through the device, and then back into the opposite end of the battery. So just like the picture here, remember it has to flow out of the battery, out through the wires and device, back through the wires, and back into the battery. You have to have that complete loop. Remember, it has to be a closed path. Everything has to be touching. If there's an opening in the path somewhere, it's not going to work. All right, so that's what a circuit is. And let's ask ourselves this: how can we connect more than one bulb if we were to want to? For example, those Christmas lights or those patio lights that I was talking about. Um, so this can be done in two different ways. We're going to learn about two different types of more complex circuits today. It only works if you have a complete flow from the battery through the wires and device and back to the battery. That principle doesn't change. You have to have a complete flow in order for this to work. There has to be a complete loop. All right. So there are two ways. There are two ways that you can set up multiple devices on a single circuit. All right, and they have two names. We call these a series circuit, or we call them a parallel circuit. A series circuit or a parallel circuit, and it all depends on how you're going to set it up and how many loops of energy you have. Okay, so remember there has to be a complete loop of energy. Let's look at that, and keeping that in mind, let's look at these next pictures here. Okay, so a series circuit. I want you to look at the picture and notice it's all in a row like a series, one after the other, right? There's still one single path all the way through here from the battery, through the wires, through all the devices, through the wire and back to the battery. One single loop, okay? So in a series circuit, there's only one path for electric current to flow. So if there is a break in just one spot, then all of the lights go out. So that's the bad thing about a series circuit. It's a lot easier to put together because you can just put one right after the other after the other. And so it's simple to assemble. But when you have a problem in just one spot, what happens to that flow of electricity? You cut it off for all of the other devices. So this is what happens when with some Christmas lights, when one bulb burns out, the whole string of lights might go out. Okay, so during the Christmas time, if you ever hear your mom or your dad or somebody getting frustrated with the Christmas lights, very mad, and they're trying to figure out what the problem is, it's because one bulb burned out, and they have to go through and figure out which one bulb burned out because that one bulb that's burned out caused all of the other lights in that series circuit to go out. Okay, so notice a series circuit is all looped in one single series. A parallel circuit, it's a little bit more complicated to put together. Okay, notice there's a lot more wires, there's a lot more loops. All right, so we call this a parallel circuit, and it's a little more complicated because there are multiple paths for the electricity to follow. All right, so it's harder to set up, but it's more reliable. So we have one path going from the battery through the first bulb and back to the battery. So this guy has his own loop here. Then we've got the second bulb from the battery through the bulb and back through the battery. So we've got a second loop here. And then the third bulb has its own loop going here. And then the fourth bulb has its own loop going here. So we actually created 4 different loops of energy traveling throughout this whole circuit here with a parallel circuit. It's more complicated to put together, but that means if one bulb breaks, the others can still stay on because they each have their own path to and from the battery. So if this first bulb goes out, no big deal. It doesn't affect the other bulbs because each bulb has its own path to and from the battery. Okay, it's all about that loop. If that loop still goes to and from the battery, then the other bulbs can still stay on. All right. If this last bulb were to burn out or get broken, The other three bulbs will still stay on because they all have their loop to and from the battery. Okay, so we're going to look real quick at this parallel circuit. Okay, so we took a look at this one yesterday. Um, Now we're going to use both bulbs. All right, so I've got a circuit here. I've got my device, or I've got my power source. I've got my conductors, all right, my wires. I've got one bulb and I've got two bulbs, all right. Now the first thing we did is we were able to get that first bulb working, right? We have one single little simple circuit, right? So the energy is traveling from my battery through my wires up to the device and then all the way back out again, all right? But I want to make this guy work on the same loop, okay? I want to make him work on the same one. So I'm going to stand up here for a second, all right? Let me see if I can put this against my shirt, make it easy to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just tape this wire here to this battery. I just so happen to have a piece of tape right here. All right, so we're going to make that one stay on. You'll notice only this top one is lit up, right? Oops. Stay together, guys. Now, if I want to make this guy light up also, I've got to have another loop for him that goes from the battery through the wires to the device and back to the battery. Notice it's broken right here. I don't have anything connected. So if I take another conductor like this paper clip and I put it right there, if I can get this together, oops, he's kind of dim, but you can see he's lighting up just a little bit right there. So now I've got both of these bulbs on. I've got one loop of energy going from the battery through the outer bulb and all the way back. Now I have another loop going from that battery through the closest bulb and all the way back. So both of my light bulbs are lit up, and this right here is called a parallel circuit. If this guy burns out, it doesn't affect this guy. If this top one burns out, it doesn't affect this guy because they each have their own loop. All right. Okay, so that's the difference between a series circuit and a parallel circuit, all right? A series circuit has them all in a series, one right after the other. A parallel circuit is going to be a little bit more complicated, but each device has its own loop to and from the battery. It has its own path, all right? So let's keep it simple. Electricity, it has to flow on a closed path that has to be touching, and we call that path a circuit, okay? If it has one single path, it's called a series circuit. Remember, everything's together in a series. But if it has multiple paths, if it has more than one loop, then we call that a parallel circuit. Okay. There's going to be a vocabulary video that your teacher's going to show you in just a little bit. Let me show you what I want you to add into your journal today. All right, there's two pictures, and I want you to draw these pictures as best as you can in your journal. You're going to label this first one a series circuit. Okay. Now, for the series circuit, I want you to put two light bulbs that are all in one single loop. Remember, a series circuit just has one loop, all right? Now, as you draw them, label the two ends, the two terminals of the battery, positive and negative, and then you're going to draw your wires coming all the way through here. Notice the color on the outside of the wires? That's going to represent that plastic coating, that insulator on the outside. I want you to go ahead and draw that, okay? And then right here, this little symbol, this is the symbol for a switch, all right? Just like a switch on the wall, a switch is just something that opens and closes to connect or disconnect a circuit, okay? And so we're going to draw a little switch there because we might see those as well. And then the second thing you're going to draw, and you can do this on the same page, you can do it at the bottom, or you can do it on the back side. Make sure and label this one parallel circuit. We're going to do the same thing, but this one's going to have two loops, just like that little circuit that I put together for you right now. You're going to have one loop that goes from the battery through the circuit, and then through the first bulb and back to the battery. And then you're going to have another loop that goes from the battery to the second bulb and then all the way back to the battery, okay? Don't forget to write this little note up here. Parallel, I wrote multiple paths, and then series, you're going to write one path, okay? Just a quick little note to help remember those.